And I'm pressing go live. And then I'm just going to put in a little title. Lee Cordell, share to group, sacral. Ooh, there we go. And go live. Usually takes a few seconds, but I think we should be pretty much good.
Yeah.
I'm checking on my phone. There we are. All right, you guys. We are back live, day 2, speaker 2. I am so excited to introduce our next panelist. So our next panelist is Dr. Lee Cordell, and a little bit about her background. She is a pleasure-focused. You can hear me okay, right? Because I hear a little feedback. Is that me? It's
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So she's a pleasure-focused, trauma-informed coach and a mentor for women who desire to fall back in love with their brains, their bodies, their businesses, and their bank accounts. And I think that is such an awesome lots of areas that are very much needed. And I reached out to Lee because we actually are both members of some of the same online communities. And I would just see her post and I was like, oh my gosh, like, how does she just do that? How does she just put herself out there like that? Like her boldness and her authenticity and her rawness and her like, don't give a fuckness is something that I really greatly admire and aspire to be on that level. And so she's going to be here to talk to us today about living a pleasure-based life and having a pleasure mindset. And so without further ado, it's a huge privilege and pleasure to welcome Dr. Cordell to the summit.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm like, this is one of my favorite topics. I'm like, I could talk about this for 3 days, right? So, um, first of all, I just also want to say thank you for that amazing introduction. And honestly, learning to live a pleasure-focused lifestyle, like adopting a pleasure-focused mindset, is one of the ways that I was really able to start doing that, like be more real and raw and vulnerable, because I really started focusing on what felt good. Like even if it felt scary, like did it feel good too? Um, so today I want to walk us through a few things. First of all, I just want to talk about like what pleasure is, because the word pleasure for me it used to have like a weird feeling to it. And I'm going to tell you a little fun story about that. I'm going to walk you through what it means to focus on pleasure from a mindset perspective and a strategy perspective, as instead of the traditional ways that we focus, the more patriarchal, puritanical ways of hustling and focusing on productivity. And then how do we know what feels good? Like, how do we tap into that? And lastly, really going into how we can use a pleasure focused mindset to set goals, to make progress on those goals, and to like really just enjoy our lives and our businesses. So, what is pleasure? I am a former professor, graduate level professor. So, I'm always big on like pulling out definitions first, just so we all know we're talking about the same thing. Because pleasure, like I said, has a lot of connotations and definitions to it. But pleasure is simply enjoyment or satisfaction of something that we desire to do. It's gratification, it's delight. It can be sexual, it can be non-sexual, it can be, um, it can be so many different things. We can get it from just like the nice warm breeze on our skin to like the most delicious encounter with another human. And so when I used to hear the word pleasure, and I've told a story like in a lot of places. So if you're hearing it again, like hopefully that it'll still be enjoyable. But I met my coach, Julia Wells, who runs a pussy-based business, a pleasure-focused business. And at that point, I was coaching women and helping them get success and fulfillment. And what was so funny about that was I always felt like there was something a little bit missing there, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what was missing. I was like, okay, I have success, I have fulfillment, but like there still feels like there's something more. And I was listening to her and she used the word pleasure and she was talking about having pleasure in your business. And I was like, whoa. My reaction was literally like this gut clench, like that doesn't sound good. And then I had this like wake up realization moment of, why does pleasure not feel good? Why does feeling good not feel good? Why does letting things be easy, letting things be fun, like enjoying myself, like really enjoying myself in my life, in my business, not feel good? And so I kind of went down like this rabbit hole of self discovery. Like, okay, well, do we even know what feels good? Like, do we even know what we really enjoy? Not what we've been programmed to enjoy, not what we've learned to enjoy. And what I realized was, is I thought that I was in love with hustle. Like I thought that I was in love with being a productive human. Like that's what really turned me on, lit me up, made me happy. And in reality, I was like, yeah, that's part of it. Like it feels good to get I think I can cuss in here. Like it feels good to get shit done. Like it feels good to like, you know, be productive, to like check stuff off the to-do list. But I'm also like getting into bed at the end of the night going like, really? Is that all there is? And so I kind of dug deeper and realized like I actually don't like hustling. I don't like being tired all the time. I don't like working 80-hour weeks. I don't like always focusing on the next goal, on the next achievement, like telling myself that I will enjoy my life when I have these things happen, when I hit these goals. And so I I basically like messaged Julia and was like, hey, I'm hiring you. I'm like, what? Kind of like domed her a little bit. I was like, I'm hiring you. And she's like, okay, great. Like, right. And I was like, because I had such an adverse reaction to what you said that like, I know that this is the next area that I need to go into. And that was about 18, almost, actually almost, yeah, like 18 months ago. And in the last 18 months, it's just been this really fun, like uncomfortable, but pleasurable experience of learning like what it is that I want, what would feel good. And really like building that into every single piece of my intimate life with my husband, of how I parent, of how I show up with my family, like in with my elders, with my siblings, how I showed up in my career and eventually left my career because I realized it didn't feel good. In my business, in my body, right? And so when I decided that I was going to focus on pleasure, I really had to kind of like define what that meant. So I was like, okay, can I really trust myself? Right? This is a big part of pleasure for women, by the way. Can I really trust myself to remove all of the rules, all of the restrictions, all of the constrictions that I've placed on myself in terms of how things have to look, how things have to go, like how successful it has to appear to other people, like how many things I have to check off the to-do list, and can I really focus in on what I desire, recognizing what I desire, and taking my focus off of the destination and placing it on the journey, right? And so this is the difference between hustle mode and pleasure mode. Now, I'm not going to completely knock hustle mode because there are times where you like need that get her done attitude, right? Like there are times where we need a little bit of that hustle. It's never an all or nothing game. And the vast majority of women or women identifying folks that I talk to really tell me that they like all they know is hustle. All they know is focusing on the destination. All they know is like checking off the to-do list. So for a while, when you focus on pleasure, it really gets to be this like, I'm going to take everything off, right? I'm going to take off all the rules and all the restrictions. And like, I'm going to just really lean into like experiencing this moment, experiencing how I feel in my body in this moment at this time, and thinking about how future decisions are going to feel at that time, right? When the future becomes the present, how is this going to feel? And this is really like, this is revolutionary. This is transformative. And what I will also say is that this focus on pleasure instead of on hustle is very rebellious. It's why it's why one of my brands is called Pleasure Rebel, is because like it is an active rebellion in today's society to lead a pleasure focused life, because it goes totally against what we have been taught, which is that we need more rules, we need more restriction, we need to focus on the destination, we need to eat our dinner before we have our dessert, right? We need to push off the pleasure to the future, to the finish line, and like just burn ourselves down on the way there, like do whatever it takes on the way there for it to feel good. And once I realized, like, wow, like that's exhausting. And I've gotten, a bachelor's degree, I've gotten 2 master's degrees, I've gotten a doctoral degree. I've been doing this nursing because I was a nurse practitioner. I am a nurse practitioner, but I was practicing as a nurse practitioner and as a professor. And I realized like every single thing I'm doing is like pushing off the pleasure, pushing off the enjoyment until it's done. And then I'm not even like able to enjoy the moment. That's when it was like, okay, the focus gets to be on the pleasure. So if you are over here going, how do I do this? It sounds really scary, but we got to take off the restrictions. We have to look at all the places that you are putting rules on yourself about how you are supposed to show up, how you should show up, like how your parents taught you to show up, how your teachers taught you to show up, how society on a daily basis is saying this is who you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to show up and how it should feel good. And recognize that like we are all different, we are all unique, like, and we're all going to find pleasure in different things. So one of the places I started taking off rules was my diet. I actually went very anti-diet, right? Like I swung the pendulum from like, I'm going to restrict everything I'm eating, and actually just a little bit like of a trigger warning here, like very disordered eating for 20 years, right? And to the point where it was like, I'm going to take off all the restrictions. Like, I'm not going to count a calorie. I'm not going to measure how long I've worked out or how many calories I've burned while working out. I'm not going to track anything except how much water I'm putting in my body and how much I'm sleeping, because I know I'm not sleeping enough. And didn't sleep for like a decade, right? And as I started to do this in this area, there were other areas that started just kind of, it started like leaking into, right? My business was another one I was doing this with. So I was like, what would feel really good? Like, how do I want to build? Like, first of all, do I want a big business? Right? This is something that I think is so important for us to talk about, especially right now, because there is so much focus on like building a 7-figure business, like on hitting 10K months, on having the 6-figure year. And like some of us don't want that, right? Like some of us holding that, having the capacity for that is so high. Like it requires a lot of responsibility. It requires a lot of, just intentionality, of time, of energy, of effort. And for some of us, like that's not going to feel good. So really just focusing in on like, what kind of business do you want to, and I use the word build, but like, what kind of business do you want to create? I like that word. It's a little more pleasurable, right? Like, what kind of business do you want to birth into the world? And how do I want to show up in that business? Because just because I birth that business out to the world doesn't mean I have to be the CEO. It doesn't mean I have to be the one at the front. I can actually hire other people to do those things. I can sell the business. Like I can hire someone else to run the company while I'm in the background doing what feels good for me. And, talking about me being visible and vulnerable and raw, like I love being at the head of the table. I love being the one making the decisions. I love being the one in charge, unless I have like a proven team of people around me that I trust like implicitly. And I'm just like, you make the decisions, you do whatever you think is best. And there are others of us out there that just, that's not how we like to show up. Like we do like to be the one to follow the leader, and there can be leadership in that. So like leaning into what would feel really good for your business setup, for your role in your business, how often you work, who you work with. Do you want a partner? I have clients who go into business with other people, and I think that's gorgeous. I'm an independent person. I will hire the support team, but I don't go into business with other people. It's just what I like. And who knows, that might change at some point, but like that's just how I like to show up. I love to collaborate with people, but being in a business with someone, mutually owning it, not my jam, and that's okay. So asking yourself what feels good there. Um, Even from like a physical pleasure standpoint, how do you like to move? How do you like to be touched? How do you like to, like, what do you like to put into your body, right? Like what feels good for you? And so how do we know what feels good? Right? Like, how do we know what feels good? How do we know what we want? This is one of those things that I had to really start learning, relearning, because I was never taught how to really tap into my intuition, how to tap into my inner knowing, my like wisdom, right? To my connection with infinite intelligence, God, the universe, spirit, source, whatever you want to call it. I never I was never really taught, and not out of a place of intentionality, but just out of a place that the people who raised me were never taught this either. How to really know what was the right thing for me, how to really know what I enjoyed. And so I had to spend a lot of time when I started asking myself those questions. Like some of the questions I knew the answers to, or I at least knew, like, oh, this is where I'd like to start. And some of them I didn't. Some of them I was like, I don't know. And I felt very stuck in indecision because I'd taken the rules and the restrictions off, and it still like didn't feel safe for me to be without them. So a lot of what I started doing was like what I call trauma informed affirmations. So I would, um, instead of saying like, I feel good in my business, I feel good in my body, right? I make decisions that I make awesome decisions, right? Saying these things that, or I make six figures in my business, I'm a successful business owner, I make lots of money, right? I make good decisions with money, I'm awesome in relationships. Like, depending on where you're coming from a trauma standpoint, from a past painful learning standpoint, saying those kinds of things, stepping into believing that about yourself isn't going to feel good. And in fact, instead of getting pleasure and figuring out what feels pleasurable and by like using those statements and using those affirmations, what actually happens is we trigger our past wounds, like we trigger our past traumas, the parts of ourselves that don't feel safe, the ourselves that really were taught like it's not okay for you to trust yourself, you make poor decisions, you're not good with money, you're not going to be good in a relationship, you're not going to like be able to run a successful business, you're not allowed to be happy, it's supposed to be hard, it's not allowed to be easy, it's not supposed to feel good. And I hear this from other women so often because like one of the things that I used to hear so often when I was a child was like life sucks and then you die. Like life's supposed to be hard, right? One of the quotes that my parents used to say to me all the time is from an old movie that I've never even actually seen, and I can't even remember the title of the movie. But this woman's trying to do this really, really hard thing, and she can't do it. And the guy says to her, like, she's trying to get over a wall, and the guy says to her, like, walk around, sugar britches, basically meaning like, you can't get over that wall, it's too hard for you, so like just give up. And that was one of the things that my parents used to say. Like we used to make that joke. And again, like this isn't to say anything about who raised me or who raised you, because we all have our own traumas, we all have our own experiences. But when you've got that stuff underneath, when you have those things underneath, it can be hard to get to pleasure. It can be hard to find safety in pleasure, safety in feeling good. So one of my favorite things to do is I really, the system I came up with, because I was like, look, like I can't go from trauma to abundance. I can't go from unsafety to pleasure. It's just not going to work for me. My brain is going to like just be like, yeah, right. No, thank you. Actually, in fact, like, let's snap back into unsafety, because like this is just too much. This is too far away. We don't believe this is possible. So I created trauma informed affirmations of, it is safe for me to feel good. I am allowed to have what I desire, to know what I desire. It is possible for me to trust myself and have everything work out. I am allowed to run a successful business. It is safe for me to experience physical pleasure in my body. I am allowed to feel as good as I desire to feel, right? And as I started using these affirmations, it was like my brain went, okay, we don't believe that we're going to have it, but we believe it's possible. And like, we can see how it might be safe. Like, maybe not for us, but like, we can see how for somebody it might be safe. We can see for how it could be allowed. We can see how it could be possible. And then by like cracking that door open in my subconscious mind, in my brain, I was able to start like actually shifting it, because what happened was I was able to start seeing evidence of other people who were experiencing pleasure and having safety, right? My coach, the women in my group. And I was able to start seeing the places in my life where I already had pleasure and it was safe. And so I could take those examples, I could take that evidence and apply it over to these places where I had unsafety for so long. Excuse me. And like start to shift them bit by bit. And so and by the way, like, one of the things that my coach and I did, which I just was, I credit her with, like, this was one of the things that brought me the most pleasure. And it was, we talked about, my husband and like how he always, like, he just wanted me to feel good. Like, he is such an amazing, he's a unicorn of a man. He wanted me to feel so good. Like, he loved providing and protecting me. And so she's like, okay, we're going to make him the PR director of your business. And I was like, he doesn't know public relations. Like, he's a historian. He works at a museum. Like, what are you talking about? And she was like, no, like, let's make him your pleasure relations. And I was like, oh, cool. So he and I had a chat, and I was like, look, your job with my business is, you don't have to be in this with me, because I know you don't want to be, but I also know that you love to like help me feel good. And like, we both love to help each other feel good, to set each other up for success that way. And I was like, so I need you to be my pleasure relations manager, like, or director. Like, I need you to make sure I'm fed with the best food and I have water and I've moved my body and I'm standing up between like calls, and like, I'm having some other pleasurable experiences on a frequent basis. And he was like, done. Right. And ever since, it's been really fun. Like, even today, like, he got me set up for this call. Like, he brought me water, and he's gonna make dinner. And like, you don't need a partner for this, but it can also be really fun to like buddy up with a friend who also wants to start having more pleasure and having this pleasure focus in their business and in their life, and be like, hey, like, what are we going to do for ourselves today? Right? Like, what are you doing? What are you adding in? What affirmations are you using? What are you going to say? Like, what are you going to say to yourself? What are you going to do between your breaks? Like, and have those check-ins where where you are reminding each other and reminding yourselves that like, this is allowed, this is safe, this is possible, and I'm taking action on that. So part of knowing what feels good is like creating safety in your nervous system to experience pleasure, because until you do that, it's going to be really hard for you to even know. And that's okay, and it's normal. And if you are there, please know that that is so okay and normal. And that's where I started too. So like, totally cool. And once you start getting like, okay, it's starting to feel more safe, it's starting to feel more allowed for me to experience pleasure, and I still like don't even know what I want, this is where I start playing the yes no game. So I'm a generator, by the way, from a human design standpoint, if anybody understands human design. So like, I'm very, like, my decisions are based in my sacral area, right? So I make a lot of or like or like I make a lot of noises. Those are my yeses and nos. And so I've started really listening to myself when people are talking, when I'm watching TV, when someone asks me a question. Like I listen to the noises I make. Like those are my yeses and nos, my instinctual ones. And actually, when I follow those, I'm like right on whether it was a yes or a no 100% of the nearly 100% of the time. But I don't always follow them because I'm human and get distracted and don't always pay attention. So like, and if you have no idea what I'm talking about, totally cool too. But if you are someone who notices you make a lot of noises, like that's such a fun way to lean into, ooh, does this feel good or does this not feel good? One of the ways I also know that it doesn't feel good is if I'm like silent, because if I'm silent and don't even like call to make a noise, it's not usually exciting or like moving enough for me. So one of the, yeah, so like coming back to this idea of yes and no is like we can ask ourselves questions, right? So one of the things that I'll do is I will say like, okay, like, do I want to move right now? Hmm, no. Okay, do I want to sit still? Do I want to sit? No. Do I want to lay down? Yeah. You hear my noises right there? Yeah. And cool. Okay, what do I want to do while I'm laying down? Right? Do I want to watch TV? Do I want to read a book? Do I want to take a nap? Do I want to have a self pleasure session? Like, what do I want? What would feel good? Right? And and this is something I teach my clients right off the bat. This is one of the pleasure focused foundational practices that I teach is like getting really clear on your yes and no about all of the little daily things that you're choosing. Because if you can get really clear on your yeses and your nos around like which pair of socks you want to wear, or, if you want to work from home or you want to go to Starbucks, or, like these littler decisions, smaller decisions, then you can start to, when you are with other people and they throw up a question at you, you're going to have such a faster like inclination to be like, oh, this is a yes or this is a no. And sometimes you are going to land on a not sure. Sometimes you're going to land on a not sure. And that not sure is sometimes a yes that is afraid to be said. It's sometimes a no that's afraid to be said. And sometimes it's just legitimate, like, I don't have enough information to make this choice. Excuse me. I am not fighting. I am surrendering to and loving my body through a suspected ulcer right now. So I apologize that I keep stopping for a second. So when we are in that not sure space, what we do is we ask ourselves like, okay, what is the fear? Is there a fear? Like, what am I afraid of if I were to say yes here? What is the fear around me saying no here? And if there's legitimately like no fear around the yes, because also oftentimes like we know we're a yes, we're just afraid to say it because it feels like we're going against our programming, what we learned, our past. And I see this even more with the no. Like, have you heard that term, no is a complete sentence? I see this so often with women is because we're trained to be the good girl, right? Like, and this is why sometimes also we don't say yes, is because we're trained to be the good girl. It's I might say her name wrong, but I think it's Kasha Urbanek, who talks about the good girl double bind of like being stuck, bound up in between the too much and the not enough. And so many times we're afraid to say no because we feel like we're not going to be enough. We're not loving enough. We're not considerate enough. We're not compassionate enough. We're not helpful enough. And we're really afraid to say yes because we're afraid we're going to be too much. We're too needy, too whatever, too excited. And honestly, this has been such a huge thing for me, is like really leaning into the yeses around public speaking, because I freaking love public speaking. Like whenever someone asks me to do this, I actually have to like slow myself down because like the puppy excited part of me that loves speaking is like wants to say yes, yes, yes. And then I have to actually remind myself, like, you only have a finite amount of energy. Like, let's make sure we're not doing this during a week where we're already working 30, 40 hours, because 40 hours is our max amount that we're going to work in a week, and we like to keep it under 30 if at all possible. So like I have to make sure that it actually is in alignment with what I'm doing, right? And so that has been one of the things that I've learned is like when we check in with ourselves and we allow ourselves to say yes or no, we are also allowed to say like I need a minute, right? So oftentimes we don't experience pleasure in our decision making because we feel like we have to give somebody an answer right away. And I learned this, and I can't remember who taught me this, but I learned this a few weeks ago, and it's just gorgeous. And I've been using it ever since, and everything feels so much better. Like saying, hey, when someone asks you to do something, hey, that sounds awesome. Like I think I would be interested in that. When do you need to know by? Right? Like, and so if it's a thing on Friday night with my friends and they're like, yeah, we just need to know by Friday morning so we can update the reservation. I'm like, great, let me let you know on Friday morning. Because the woman I am today is not the woman I'm going to be on Friday, right? Especially if like I'm in thinking of like monthly cycles, if I'm in like my maiden energy where I'm like, let's get shit done. Like, let's do all the fun. Like, let's be productive. It feels good to be productive in that. Versus like I'm in enchantress, like going into crone energy, like premenstrual, menstrual. Like, I don't want to do crap for a few of those days. Like I want to lay around in my most comfy clothes and like not get out of bed and just like enjoy all of the like sensual comforts, right? I don't want to speak in front of anyone at that point. So like knowing that about myself, now I can be like, yeah, like let me check in and let me see if that's the right thing. And I can pause and not say the yes or no immediately. So like you are allowed to make decisions in a way that feels good for you. You are allowed to, if you're somebody like me who follows that energy cycle, knows their body really well, knows when they're going to be like full of energy versus when they're going to be more needing to refill and recover, restore, then you can start to make decisions based on that and have your schedule feel really, really great. And coming back to the no, right? The no can like no's clear the way for yeses. No's clear the way for the hell yeses, right? I can't say hell yes to the like 3 to 5 things that are so important to me, that bring me so much pleasure, that jazz me up, if I'm saying yes to all of these other things that don't feel good, that take my energy, that don't fill it back up. I can't do that, right? And I get to protect those 3 to 5 hell yeses, right? My one-on-one clients, my mastermind clients, they are my hell yeses. My kids and my husband, they are my hell yeses, right? Like they get to come first. And if I'm saying yes to all of these other people around me, then that doesn't leave energy for the very people whom I love the most, including myself. So important to lean into those yeses and nos and really start to pay attention to what feels good for you. And the last thing I want to talk about is setting goals and making progress. And I alluded to this back when we were talking about focusing on pleasure instead of hustle. It really is about, like I said, enjoying the journey instead of the destination. However, I'm not just about like this isn't me saying don't set goals. I don't know if you can see. I didn't realize you could see this. I just got this new computer, so I didn't know like what the setup was going to look like. But I have this goal behind me that says, $1 million by December 31st, 2021. $1 million in revenue. Like that is my goal, is to do $1 million in sales by December 31st. And what I'm not going to do around that goal is if I hit 700,000 by December 31st, like curl up in a ball and cry for 3 weeks. Like what I'm not going to do is burn my business down. What I'm not going to do is like beat myself up about it, right? This right here is actually something that I look at and reminds me who I want to embody along the journey. So it reminds me of the decision-making process I went through to decide what progress, how I define progress towards this goal. And so often what we do when we set a goal, because a goal is different than outcomes, right? A goal is a little different than outcomes. So often when we set a goal, the outcomes by which we measure whether we are making progress towards that goal are not helpful. I'm going to say that again. When we decide on a goal, the outcomes that we use to define what progress looks like toward that goal are not helpful. So really, oftentimes what we do is we choose goals that are outside of our control. We choose goals that don't feel, or excuse me, we choose outcomes that are outside of our control. We go after outcomes that don't feel good, because for us as people, as humans, it doesn't feel good for us to be out of control unless we've given control to someone else to let us be out of control. Right? Like there are some times where I'm totally out of control and it feels great, but that's intentional. Like I've given that control up intentionally, right? Versus I don't have control of this, never did, never will, right? So going after external outcomes that I can't control is not going to feel good. And are you ready for what some of these are? They're your metrics. They are your metrics around how many followers you have, how many people sign up for a program, how many likes you get, how many people open an email, how many subscribers you have to your list, how many people listen to your podcast, how many pounds you lose, how many, I'm trying to think of some others, like how many pant size you drop. Guess what? That's out of your control. Now, you can have some influence on that. Absolutely. I am not saying that you can't influence those things. And in fact, you absolutely can influence those things. And I'm also not saying that metrics aren't important. Metrics are very, very, very important. However, metrics are important when we are reviewing, not when we are planning. So when it comes to a pleasure-focused mindset, what we're doing is we are focusing on internal outcomes. We are focusing on what actions would feel great to take that are in alignment with someone who has this goal. So let me give you an example. I call this version of myself $1 Million Lee. Money Queen is like another thing I use. Now, $1 Million Lee is a version of myself that already lives inside me. She's already here. And sometimes it's hard to bring her out with everything going on in the world. So I intentionally, on a consistent basis, sit down and I'm like, okay, what would $1 Million Lee version do here? Right? Like when a situation comes up, what would she do here? How would she act? How would she show up? What would she say? What would she say yes to? What would she say no to? What would she not do? Right? What would she not even like spend her energy or her time on? So an example of this is the computer that I'm talking to you on, I just bought today. And I, about 6 months ago, was like, I need a computer. Like, I kind of need a new computer. Like this one, the charging port's broken. Like it only charges in a very specific way. And like, it's just like, it works, but it doesn't, right? And so I did this adorable thing where I was like, okay, like let me upgrade like everything around. Like I'm focusing on calling in this $1 million version of me, like who makes all of these things, but I kept not looking at like replacing the computer. I kept ignoring this part. And finally, like a week ago, I was talking with, maybe a couple weeks ago, I was talking with one of my coaches and she was like, Lee, because I was talking to her about one of my clients who was stuck. And she said, Lee, you're seeing your clients stuck because you're stuck. And I was like, oh, yep. You know, we see the things in other people that need worked on when it's something that oftentimes we need to work on. That's like that it doesn't feel good about ourselves. That is not pleasurable. I was like, you're totally right. Like I am stuck. And so I did this adorable thing where I like found all of the other places where I was stuck and I like made decisions there. And then finally I sat down and I was like playing with this computer right before an important call and couldn't get it to work. And I was like, this is you being stuck. This is you waffling like for 6 months about this dang thing. This is you accepting mediocrity when you told yourself that you were no longer going to do that around things that you really wanted. I was like, okay, cool. So I was like, let me see if I can get my computer fixed. And so I gave it to my husband. He took it in yesterday, and they were like, nope, ma'am, this is so old that we can't even replace. Like, we can't even source the parts. And I was like, awesome. So once I had that piece of information, right? Once I knew that that couldn't happen, I was like, awesome, we're buying the new computer. And so like I went in the store, and I kid you not, 7 minutes later, after walking in the store, walked out with a brand new laptop. And that's that. And now I'm here, and it's amazing, and it's easy, and I can finally see all the people and do all the things at the same time. And my point here is like that is an internal outcome, right? I bought the computer. I made the investment. I showed up to the call. I sent the message when it felt scary. I did the Facebook Live. I accepted the invite to the summit. I promoted my event even when the external outcomes weren't there. And this is one of the biggest places that I see. It's the hardest place to be in pleasure. And it's also like one of the most important. Can you find pleasure when the external outcomes aren't there? Can you find pleasure in the fact that you are showing up, you are doing the things that you know work, you are running the plays that you know will move you down the field, even when it feels like you're not budging an inch? And this is like the most beautiful thing, because when you can focus in on those internal outcomes, when you can lay your head against the pillow that night and be like, oh my gosh, like nothing worked, and I showed up the way I wanted to show up. I showed up in a way that felt really freaking good, and nothing went the way that I thought it was going to, and that's okay. That is like when the magic starts happening. That is when I see people have exponential growth, because they're like, look, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the external outcomes are there or not. I am still going to do the thing. I'm still going to show up in support of myself. I'm still going to figure out how to let things feel good even when they're hard. I'm going to figure out how to let things be easy instead of making them hard. I'm going to say yes when I want to say yes and say no when I want to say no. I'm going to call in this version of myself that like I know lives within me. And then if and when I get the goal, cool. Right? So when I tell people, like, I probably sound like a crazy person, but they're like, oh, you want to do 6 figures by the end of the year? And I'm like, yeah, it's already done. That or something better. And they're like, oh, like, I'm not trying to be cocky. Like, I'm not trying to be like, conceited. Like, that's just, I know it's already done because like, I'm already showing up as if it's done. And it gets to feel good. So you actually collapse timelines when you do this. I have seen the most amazing results, like both myself, I've seen it in fellow coaches who do this, I've seen this in clients, when they really decide, like, I'm committed to doing what feels good, even when the results aren't visible, they end up, when they turn around and look backwards, like when they do this for days, weeks, months, years, and they turn around and they look backwards, all the external outcomes are there. Or I should say most, if not all. Now, they don't always look the way that they thought they were going to, right? Maybe they thought they were going to earn all their money through a partnership with a business partner who that relationship just like totally ruptured, and things were so just felt really bad for a while. And then, oh my gosh, like out of that, they birthed this amazing offer that then sold like hotcakes, and like they're where they wanted to be. And it doesn't look a single bit like what they thought it would. If you told me 10 years ago that this is what my life was going to look like, I would not have believed you. If you told me that I wasn't going to be a professor, I wasn't going to be working as a nurse practitioner, I was only going to be working 30 hours a week and not the 80 I was working then, I was going to have time for my kids, I was going to have time for my husband, I was going to have day dates on a Wednesday at 2 o'clock with my husband. Like, if you told me that this is what my life was going to look like, I wouldn't have believed you. Not the goodness of it. and honestly, yes, the goodness of it, but not just the goodness of it, but I'm not where I thought I was going to be. And yet, I'm not anywhere near the destination I thought I was going to be in. And yet, I have the feeling I wanted to feel when I got there. And I felt it so often throughout the journey. So that is my like ultimate desire for you, is to like take some detours off the path, right? Is to like feel into where you want to go and what you want to feel and how you want to do things, and like go in a different direction. And yes, like set a destination, but also know that the destination doesn't really matter. The journey is what matters. So yeah, that is what I have for you today. That is a pleasure focused mindset.
Whoa. Oh my God. I am just sitting here like screaming at the computer, like, yes, 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 yes. Like, I'm so, so happy you're here, and I didn't even know you that well, but it was something just inside me that was like, she needs to be here. My soul domed the situation, as you put it, you know?
Yes,
Um,
she's like,
and
this is
like,
happening.
yeah, like everything you said, this is so far one of my favorite talks that we've had. Like everything you said was just such a big yes. A question that came up for me that I noticed, the more and more that I try to live this way, that I think a lot of people have is like when we're so accustomed to that conditioning of the hustle way, how do you release the shame and the guilt that you feel
Oh,
for being in the pleasurable way? Because that's something that's still an ongoing, practice for me.
I am like reflecting back on that 45 minutes and I'm like, did I really not say the word shame once? Like, that is maybe the only conversation where I have not said that word in like a really long time. Because that's, and so I'm so glad you asked this, because this is actually like, that is the ground level foundation work of what I do, because it's so hard to have pleasure without shame. Or excuse me, it's so hard to have pleasure with shame, is what I meant. So when you feel bad for everything that you do, like, or when you're like, oh my gosh, like the second I step out of this like carefully constructed box that I was placed in, I'm hearing from people, or I'm feeling the negative effects of that. It can be really, really hard. And I'm not gonna lie and say, like, there were times where I can actually still I use this example and we laugh about it now, but like I posted like something on the internet about having like the biggest sales day I'd ever had, because I was just really fucking excited. I was like so excited. And my dad, the next time I saw him, was like, you shouldn't put things like that on the internet because you're putting your family at risk. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like you're making yourself a target for people to like rob you or take advantage of you. And like I had to, at the moment I was pissed. Like I was so mad. And I felt all this shame about like how I didn't show up right and all of these things. And then I thought about it and I was like, okay, think about where your dad is coming from. Like where your dad grew up, if they let people know they had money, they would have been robbed. So like your dad is trying to create some safety, some security for you. Now, the problem is that his way of doing this feels shameful because it feels like there's something wrong with me for not going along with the way that he believes I should. And so really coming to the realization of like, he's allowed to have that thought. Whoever wants to judge me, whoever wants to say that I'm doing the wrong thing, they are allowed to have that thought. And that's their thought, not mine. Like, and really recognizing like, I can keep living in a way where I just feel not fully expressed, but like what is that doing to me and what is that doing for me, and also what is that doing to and for others? Like I have three little kids, do I want to model for them that they're not allowed to fully express themselves? Do I want to model for them that that they should feel shame for being who they are? And that was the big thing for me, was like no. And in fact, by me like just showing myself and whoever else is involved, if there is someone else involved, just a lot of like self-love and acceptance for that, because it's such a part of our human experience. And I think that this is a big place where people go, where we get off track, is we shame ourselves for feeling shame. So like, instead of, when you notice yourself feeling the shame, like I can remember that feeling, like it was like tight, white, hot, like in my chest, and my face got all red, and breathing into that, being like, okay, we are feeling some shame, we are feeling some guilt, we are feeling stupid, frustrated, dumb, like naive, whatever. Awesome. Awesome. And how can I love myself in this? Like, how can I accept myself in this? How can I recognize that this is a feeling that every single other human on the planet has felt? And like, what do I need? Because when we feel shame, there's an unmet need. Whether it's for love, whether it's for acceptance, whether it's for expression, whatever. So like, really just tapping into like, what is that unmet need underneath of there? And guess what? It wasn't my dad's job to give it to me. It was mine. So yeah, I was just like, Dad, I was like, thank you so much for caring about me. Like, thank you so much for caring enough that you want me to be safe. Like, I really appreciate that. And that was my answer. Not, okay, I'm going to take the post down, or like, screw you, dude. Like, it wasn't either of those. It was like, thank you so much for loving me to the point that you care enough to say something. And I'm going to leave it up.
That takes so much, you can just see how much personal growth you've done on this to be able to not be reactive with a parent. Because I noticed for myself, like that old conditioning that I had, when it comes to me from a parent, it triggers me even more than like a normal person, and I just go into straight reactivity. So that's
Yes.
extremely impressive.
I didn't start with my parents. My parents were one of the places that I was like, okay, I've done a lot of work around releasing shame, and now we're gonna start setting boundaries, right? Like, and it's really boundary work. Like, shame work is boundary work, both with an internal and external. It's like, I'm gonna set a boundary that when I feel like I'm not enough, when I feel unworthy, that I get to show myself love. Like, and I'm going to set a boundary that when I feel like, when other people try to make me feel unworthy or unloved, that I'm not going to take that on as mine. That I'm either going to like remove myself from the situation, or I'm going to say, not in the moment, even always, but like at a calmer time, at a time that's not where I'm even have a hint of reactivity. Like, hey, you know what? I am no longer, when we discuss money, it doesn't feel good for me. And so like, in order for me to stay like in this relationship, like, this is just going to have to be one of those topics that if you bring it up, I'm not going to respond. And like, let me know if that doesn't feel good for you, and we can chat about it. Because they might have their own boundary too. But yeah, it's with my parents, it was a definite thing. And like, my mother's a social worker, so like, she knew it was. I love her to death, but it's just so funny sometimes where I'm like, it just goes to show you, like, I've done all this work, and my kids there's gonna be stuff with my kids that I've done that you know they're gonna need to work through and process as they get older. Like, that's part of the human experience. We all do the best we can at the time we're in.
Yeah, that's amazing. Another thing, I think one of the biggest things that really like gravitated me towards you, interestingly, is just like how um visible you are online, and how raw you are, and how authentic you are online. Like, how do you not let the fear of that visibility and people's judgments, your own feelings of shame and guilt, like how do you not let that get in the way of your truth and your pleasure of expression?
Yeah. So honestly, at first it was like a rebellious thing. It was like it was, I don't want to call it reactive, but it was me swinging the pendulum the other way and being like, I don't care what anyone else thinks. Like, and which was cute because like I did care, right? We all care. We all care. We all want people to like us. We all want to be accepted. We all want to be part of the community. Like that is a normal thing. If you don't want that, that's like 0.01% of the population doesn't want that, and that's a actual issue, right? It's not an issue for you to want to be liked. It's not an issue for you to want to be part of the community, to not be shunned. Like that is good. That is how we as communities protect each other and act in the common good, right? But like for me, it really came from a just like when I started dipping my toe into it and doing it, yeah, like I got some people that were like, oh, I hate this. And like some people that were like, oh, I love this. But I was getting messages on the back end from people who are like, hey, I don't even feel comfortable enough to like put this on your post, but thank you, because like you're providing a voice to something that like I didn't know other people felt. And once I had that happen, I was like, oh well, now I have to do it. Like this is annoying, but like like I was like, I if I if I don't say it, like other people might not say it either. And then it goes unsaid. And then people don't get to heal. They don't get to feel better. They don't get to realize that they're normal, that they're not broken, that they don't need fixed. And so I guess you call it kind of a calling. And honestly, I hate it sometimes. Sometimes I've told this to my husband. I'm like, I'm just gonna like shut down my Facebook account, go away. He's like, that's funny. I'm like, no, I really want to though. There's some days where I'm just like, I don't want to do this. And you're going to feel that way in your business too. Like whatever your calling is and however you feel called to like bring it to the world, there's going to be like there's just going to be days where you're like, I don't wanna. And yeah.
I love that. You're so amazing. I've gotten so much out of this. Um, I don't see any other questions in the chat, but if anyone has questions, please post in the chat. We're watching the chat. I'd love to ask Lee your questions, but one question I think everyone probably wants to know is how can people work with you? Do you have any programs running? You mentioned one-on-one coaching. Where can people find you, follow you to get more information about working with you?
Yeah, sure. So like if you don't want to this is a funny way to say this, but I was like, if you don't want to interact with me, like if you don't if you're looking to just like hear more of what I have to say, like my ideas on things, I have a podcast called I'm Not For Everyone, the shirt, so that's a really fun way to learn. We go through the alphabet every week. We do like A, B, C, D, E. We're on next week's M for money. Um, and then I work with people in 3 levels. So I have a membership community called Pleasure Rebel, and there's I think almost 50 women in there now. That opens back up in July, end of June. I have a mastermind that has anywhere from 20 to 30 women in it, where you can actually get like hot seat coaching with me. We're in a Facebook group together. And that's for women who like, it's called the pleasure of business, who want to infuse pleasure into their business and have it then like seep into all the other areas. And then I do have one-on-one spot for 12. I do 6 and 12 months, but I have one 12-month spot open.
Amazing. Yeah, if you're willing to send me the links for those, I will be happy to pin
Yeah,
them
sure.
at the top of this so that anyone watching knows how to find you and reach out. And yeah, like thank you so much. This was just really, I got so many huge nuggets. I think I'm gonna have to watch it again, be just so that I anchor it in even more because yeah, like you said, it shouldn't be uncomfortable to live a pleasurable life, but because for so many of us that's not the way we were raised, it's like
Yeah.
uncomfortable, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, this feels too good. Something's wrong.
I know. Oh my gosh. Totally.
um, funny thing is I actually often go back and watch my own videos because I don't necessarily know what I said. I'm like, let me go listen to what I said again because I don't know.
I think you were just like
So
straight channeling source on this one.
straight channeling.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm excited. I saw you left all those comments. I'm like, yay, this will be great. I can go back and read them.
Yeah. And I'm sure so many people are going to, dive into the replay as well. So it'll be a ripple effect. Yeah.
Thank
Amazingly. Well,
you.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. So excited to just soak this up and to, let it hopefully be the beginning of much more collaboration, co-creation, and just grateful for you being here and sharing your message with us.
My pleasure.
Yes.